If you've ever had a friendship where you could sit in the same room, say almost nothing, and still leave feeling strangely close, you felt something a lot of people don't know how to name. Because usually we're taught to think closeness looks active. Long conversations, constant updates, fast replies, a lot of words, a lot of visible effort. So when a friendship feels strongest in quiet moments, it can almost seem confusing. Like, why did that walk where barely anything was said feel more intimate than an hour-long conversation with someone else? It doesn't look like a big deal, but it says more than you think. Some friendships feel closer in silence because silence reveals what the relationship is not demanding from you. With certain people, even when nothing is wrong, there's still a low-level pressure in the air. Pressure to keep the energy up, pressure to respond the right way, pressure to show interest, be entertaining, be emotionally available, be on. You might not consciously think that, but your body does. So even a pleasant interaction can leave you a little tired, a little edited, a little watchful. And then there are the rare friendships where none of that is needed. You sit next to each other in a car and don't rush to fill the gap. You send each other something small and don't feel pressure to turn it into a whole conversation. You walk side by side and let the environment carry part of the moment. You can both look out the window, scroll quietly, make tea, fold laundry, or just exist near each other, and somehow it doesn't feel empty, it feels full. That kind of silence isn't the absence of connection, it's often proof of it. Because a lot of social interaction is actually management, managing tone, managing impressions, managing timing, managing possible misunderstandings. In many friendships, even good ones, some part of you is still monitoring the relationship while you're inside it. Am I giving enough? Am I too much? Are they bored? Did that come out wrong? Should I say something else? When that monitoring finally turns off around someone, silence becomes possible. And that matters more than people realize. A friendship that can hold silence is usually a friendship where your presence has stopped needing constant explanation. You don't have to keep proving warmth because the warmth is already assumed. You don't have to perform closeness because closeness isn't being measured minute by minute. That's why silence can feel so intimate, not because nothing is happening, but because something very specific is happening. You are no longer managing the bond in real time. For people who are used to relational effort, this can feel almost unfamiliar at first, especially if they grew up around tension, unpredictability, or relationships where love had to be earned through emotional labor. In those environments, connection often came with vigilance. You had to read the room, notice subtle shifts, keep people comfortable, avoid saying the wrong thing, stay useful, stay agreeable, stay connected by staying attentive. So later in life, it can be easy to confuse intensity with closeness. A friendship full of constant checking in, long processing conversations, or emotional urgency can feel important because it's active. There's movement, there's reassurance, there's proof. But sometimes what feels intense isn't always what feels safe. And what feels safe isn't always loud enough to be immediately recognized. Silence changes that. In a quiet friendship, you're not always being asked to produce a version of yourself. You're allowed to be unfinished, distracted, tired, in thought. You're allowed to be present without being especially interesting. That's a deeper form of acceptance than most people talk about, and it shows up in very small ways. You don't overthink every delayed reply because the bond doesn't feel fragile. You don't panic if there's a pause in conversation because the pause doesn't mean disconnection. You don't feel the need to over-explain your mood. You can say, "I'm just tired," and it's enough. You can be quiet without being treated like a problem that needs decoding. That's not a minor social convenience. Psychologically, that's relief. Because a lot of people are carrying friendships that are warm on the surface, but exhausting underneath. Not toxic, not dramatic, just subtly effortful. The kind where you're liked, but still not fully at ease. The kind where you can talk for hours and somehow still never unclench. The friendships that feel closer in silence often remove that hidden labor. And here's where it gets interesting. The real reason this feels so powerful isn't just comfort, it's identity. Around some people, your identity becomes slightly distorted, not in a dramatic way, just enough that you start speaking a little differently, reacting a little faster, smoothing out parts of yourself, emphasizing others. You become the version of you that fits that friendship. Again, that's normal. Everyone does this to some extent. But in quieter, safer friendships, something else happens. Your identity stops having to negotiate so much. You don't feel pulled into a role, the funny one, the stable one, the listener, the one who keeps things light, the one who always knows what to say. Silence is often where you notice if someone is attached to your role or to your actual presence.
That's why two people can spend an hour doing almost nothing and still feel deeply connected after. If neither person is demanding a performance, what remains is something simpler and harder to find: unedited company. And for many people, that's the closest thing to emotional rest they experience with another human being. It's also why these friendships can feel difficult to explain from the outside. Other people might look at them and think, they barely talk, they don't seem that expressive. They're not constantly posting each other, calling each other, or narrating every detail of their lives. But closeness isn't always loud. Sometimes it's built through repetition without pressure, through time that doesn't need to be filled, through a shared understanding that contact doesn't have to be constant to be real. Silence in that way becomes its own kind of language. Not a dramatic silence, not a punishing silence, not the silence of resentment, avoidance, or distance. That silence feels cold. It creates confusion. It makes you question where you stand. It leaves you scanning for what went wrong. The silence we're talking about feels different. It softens the room instead of tightening it. It doesn't make you feel shut out. It makes you feel included without effort. You're not wondering if they're upset. You're not rushing to repair the moment. You're just there, and that is enough. That difference matters, because people often assume silence is neutral, but it rarely is. Silence can be threatening, protective, awkward, respectful, hostile, grieving, peaceful, or intimate. The feeling depends on what the relationship does to your nervous system. With one person, silence feels like rejection. With another, it feels like trust. And trust, in many friendships, is not built by what is said. It's built by what doesn't need to be said. The fact that you can be quiet without losing your place. The fact that no one rushes to interpret your stillness. The fact that nothing is being silently demanded from you in exchange for belonging. That's why some people feel unexpectedly emotional after very ordinary moments with a close friend. Sitting on a floor, driving at night, waiting somewhere together, looking at the same thing without narrating it. There's no big speech, no official declaration of care, but something inside them recognizes the rarity of the experience. They are not being managed. They are not being examined. They are not being asked to earn the atmosphere. And for someone who is used to holding relationships together with attentiveness, humor, insight, responsiveness, or emotional labor, that can feel almost disarming. Because the friendship is saying, in its own quiet way, you do not have to keep producing yourself for this to remain warm. That's a very deep kind of closeness. It also explains why some people feel lonelier in highly social friendships than they do in quiet ones. If a relationship gives you plenty of interaction but no room to stop performing, you may be seen often without ever feeling fully met. And if a relationship gives you space to be silent without becoming invisible, that can feel more intimate than constant conversation. So when a friendship feels closer in silence, it usually means the connection has moved beneath performance, beneath maintenance, beneath the need for steady verbal proof. It means the relationship can survive stillness. And maybe more than that, it means stillness is part of what makes it real. Once you see that, a lot of friendships start to make more sense. Some were built on exchange, some were built on momentum, some were built on mutual roles, and some, the rarest ones, were built on the fact that neither person needed the other to be performing in order to feel close. It was never just silence. It was safety without spectacle. And once you recognize that, you can't really unsee it. If this explains something for you, there's more to uncover.
Understanding yourself is often just noticing the pattern that was there all along.